The American experiment is now running on 250 years, and we're going to talk about whether that experiment is going well or is going sideways. Today on the show, I am your host, Sal Assante. This is the We the Patriots podcast, and let's get right into it today. So, failed to get a show out last week, and I apologize for that. But, I think we saw some very good developments in the world that maybe I could take advantage of the lapse in time. So we're going to go for that. This week, we are looking at the 250th anniversary of the start of the United States. So what better time to go over what the heck is going on around our country and around the world because of us? As I'm sure you are all aware, there was a memorandum of understanding. What the hell that means? I'm going to try my best to lay it out without being crazy, but with Iran, there was the MOU as it's known, and essentially what it is a framework to peace without actually having a peace deal, and it's been broken. So if I recorded the show last week, we would have talked about how there's memorandum of understanding, and now this week recording, it's already been broken. So what the heck is going on with that? And is it a good reflection of what our founding fathers may have wanted for the country? So basically, from my understanding, there was an attack on a ship on Iran's part using drones, and the United States decided to fire missiles back. Now, not blaming the United States for defending itself or defending, shipping containers or whatever, but the more so, I think, important point of criticizing this entire thing is that we shouldn't have gotten into this in the first place. What I've been saying for months now. And now we're at the point where it seems like any little thing can reignite us back into this conflict without actually having a way out. And the way out that was detailed in that MOU was that basically the United States has given up. We're going to be unlocking funds for the Iranian regime. We're going to release sanctions from them, basically going to put them back under the JCPOA. And that JCPOA, the deal known as the Obama deal or the Iran deal back in the day, was the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Essentially what it was to ensure that Iran's nuclear program was stuck at an enrichment level only for civilian use and not getting towards a nuclear weapon. And now the updated terms on what this new MOU from the Trump administration is detailing is basically that we're going to be back in something like the JCPOA. A colossal failure, if you ask me or ask a lot of people. I'm essentially going through all of this, wasting billions of dollars, untold billions of dollars. We won't know the cost for years, that's for sure. And getting to a point where we already were. This deal was on the table before attacks started going off in Iran earlier this year. At the end of the day, it just looks like a huge failure from the Trump administration's standpoint. Now, the Iran thing, I think I mentioned it on the last show, if not the show before that. I don't see this conflict ending anytime soon. I don't think that Trump and his administration can get out of this with saving face. So they're going to have to keep going at it, and it will continue to get worse. From the Iranian standpoint, it seems like they have a massive upper hand. If you're looking at the depletion of stockpiles, what's public anyway, which obviously is going to be all lies and propaganda, but the depletion of supplies from the United States standpoint is that it's going to take us years to build back up, missile systems, protection systems, whether you're talking about like the THAAD systems or what's the other one's not coming to mind. But either way, it's going to take us years, and that's public information. I can only imagine what the actual truth is. And at the end of the day, if Trump and his administration are unwilling to go the farthest distance, and I am not a supporter of this, but just to lay it out, if Trump is unwilling and his administration is unwilling to basically nuke Iran or nuke the Middle East, then this is a conflict that won't be able to be won, given the new tenors of what a modern war looks like, the usage of drone technology. Essentially, boots on the ground doesn't really mean much anymore, and that can be taken out of the equation quite quickly. And with all of that said, we're in a terrible spot here as Americans, and what we voted for, and comparing that to what we're getting. So to not belabor the point, I've already talked Iran for about 4 minutes here. it's not looking good. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to get out of this anytime soon. And it's just going to put us in a weaker and weaker position geopolitically, looking at things around the world. And what else can we say if you were listening to my shows or listening to people that utter things like myself? What else can we say except for basically, I told you so, this is what was going to happen. With all that said, let's look back on 250 years of America with a little bit more of a microscope under our most recent times, talking about basically from about the 2000s to where we are now in 2026, and see if this is where we think we should be or where we want to be. Looking at a few different aspects. The first one that I want to talk about is that wielding of power. Of course, you could talk about the Iran war, but you can also talk about all of our Middle East excursions, whether you want to talk about Iraq, whether you want to talk about Afghanistan, our meddling in Syria, all of our African ventures, or, whether you want to talk about us being involved in Ukraine and Russia, or with Israel against Palestine, or more so Israel and Gaza, Israel and the West Bank, all of these different things that we've tied ourselves into. And you look back on, one of the most famous quotes from our founding fathers. And it's a quote that I have actually often brought up on the show, but I think that it's important to bring up again here. So I will quote it again. This is, of course, from Washington's farewell address in 1796. And the quote goes, "Why forego the advantages of so peculiar a situation? Why quit our own to stand upon foreign ground? Why, by interweaving our destiny with that of any part of Europe, entangle our peace and prosperity in the toils of European ambition, rivalship, interest, humor, or caprice? It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. So far, as we are now at liberty to do it. For let me not be understood as capable of patronizing infidelity to existing engagements. I hold the maxim no less applicable to public than to private affairs. That honesty is always the best policy. I repeat it, therefore. Let those engagements be observed in their genuine sense. But in my opinion, it is unnecessary and would be unwise to extend them." End quote. And you look at the comparison of the words of Washington and compare them to the words of the previous, we'll say, probably 8-9 administrations, at least going back to when we were entangled in Vietnam. And you can, of course, go further than that. In our conflicts of the last century and 20 plus years, the only conflict realistically that I think that we have any real reason to have partaken in was World War II, where we were directly attacked. And that's, of course, if you're going to believe the mainstream story, which for this case, I absolutely am. But people will make the argument that even that we should not have been involved in. And yet we continue to find ourselves, especially over the last 25 years or so, getting ourselves entangled in wars that are messy. The reasoning for doing so is essentially propaganda, and finding ourselves in a position as Americans to defend what is, in a sense, idiocy. So when we look back and, whether we're upholding what the founding fathers may have wanted, but I don't think that that's the only reason. Maybe more so upholding what the documents that started this foundation of a nation, and looking back as to whether we're upholding those values, I would say we're failing on that front for sure. The whole point of our nation was to give we the people, the freedom to elect the people that we wanted, have representation in that government, and in doing so, guide the nation in a way that was best for the people, and not have essentially unelected bureaucrats or agencies leading the way. Which, if I was to argue who's more at fault, the people that we elected as the people, a Trump, a Biden, a Obama, a Bush, who's more at fault, them or the agencies that are guiding them, handing them the information and so forth? Those unelected people are, generally speaking, very culpable for getting us into these entanglements. And that is not just foreign entanglements. The amount of issues that are caused by our extending this power to unelected bureaucrats, unelected agencies, has led to issues domestically as well. Whether you want to bring up the amount of taxation that's hitting us, whether you want to talk about the inefficiency in our systems, the amount of money that's going to places that is if not making us stay stagnant, it's probably making us worse. You could bring up examples of for example, the homelessness problem in California, where more and more money every year is put into that problem, and the problem continues to stay the same or get worse. You can point to the infrastructure problem. I'll use my own example because I see it in my backyard in New Jersey, but across the country, I'm sure more and more money, more contracts going to government contractors, and seemingly less and less work getting done, our infrastructure crumbling in general. You can point to many different things in which our electing of people and them appointing unelected people on their back end to help them is continuing to put us into a hole. And I would say that that is actually quite counter to what the core mission of starting the United States, starting a democratic republic was meant to be. Yet here we are. Now, moving on to something that I think it was a very heavy opinion that I have, but I think that it's very important to bring up. And how I'm going to phrase it, and I can get hit for this, you can hit me in the comments, but how I want to put it is, I believe that we have allowed a new class of kings and nobles to make us slaves in a modern sense. Now, I'm not talking about slaves, and I'm not belittling the actual African American slaves that were used to start this country. Far from it. That being said, the way that every citizen who is not a part of this elite class of people, whether you're talking politicians, major business owners, what have you, the way that we are being treated by our leaders, quote unquote, is, in my opinion, a form of slavery. Whether you want to talk about the technology or you want to talk about the taxation, and I'm going to talk about both. So when it comes to technology, you can look at all of these different devices, the devices that I'm using right here in this room and the devices I'm using to get this message out to you are keeping us beholden to your leader. How so? Well, I'm sure all of you know the scary truth about having this iPhone, and why every single phone company wants to give you a free one every few years to make sure you're on. It's because they're spying on us. I mean, it couldn't be any more clear. Whether you want to talk about your social media usage, whether you want to talk about what came out with WikiLeaks and the NSA spying on us and spying on our phone calls, spying on our text messages, whether you want to talk about the fact that you could be scrolling any given app and you will be given an ad for something that you were talking about with a friend and your phone might have been in your pocket. You never looked this item up. You never Googled it. You've never tried to find information online, and yet you receive an ad for it. Clearly, the phone is spying on you and being used to control you. You could also talk about multiple examples at this point in the United States, in neighboring country like Canada, where you may have said something publicly on a social media platform, something like YouTube, where this is going up, that is against the government agenda, and penalized for saying that in different ways. For us during the COVID crisis, I'll call it, Andrew and I had many shows. We talked about this. We received strikes for misinformation. And when it turns out, you look down the road, looking back today on some of the stuff that we said, 99% of it was correct. Where we were coming from was from the heart and not based on, scientific data. But at the end of the day, we were correct. We were right. And yet we were still getting demonized for it. Or you see, people who go out much further than myself, whether you want to talk about people like a Nick Fuentes, people like Alex Jones, people, that may even be further than those people. And they have had their bank accounts stripped from them, their dollars locked up, assets seized for speaking, for having an opinion. I mean, it's one thing if you want to say, and I think this is fair, although it can get nasty. It's one thing if you want to say that someone is getting canceled, right? They said the wrong thing. Their fan base has left them. They're no longer getting purchases on their websites or on their products and whatever. Okay, fine. But to actually seize what someone has, first of all, their ability to free speech, or second of all, their ability to actually have commerce in our economy, be able to purchase things, be able to buy food, and having that ability taken away because you don't like what they said, you don't like what they do. Well, unless what they're doing is against the law, and last time I checked, free speech, freedom to an opinion is a law actually saying opposite, then it's gotten to a point now where we are beholden to the technology. And, you can always take that even further, especially nowadays with the things like Palantir and what the government agencies are utilizing, things like AI, but data centers and data collection to do in order to essentially turn us into a number in a spreadsheet and control our ability to be free-spirited and free-thinking people. right? And it's only going to get worse as these technologies get stronger and stronger. And on the other side of being a modern day slave in America, again, not demeaning what slavery actually was, which was beyond disgusting, but I think what we're looking at here is another form of disgusting, and that is with taxation. We started this entire country essentially over a few taxes. And when you look into it and how much we really were spending as a nation and as a people on these taxes, it was minimal. You're talking about fractions of dollars that were spent. Of course, the dollars worth very much different amounts than they are today, much lower, but fractions of the taxes that we see today. And yet we're talking about things like the Boston Tea Party. We're talking about tar and feathering tax collectors and so on. And yet, where we are today is that the modern person who is doing reasonably well will see upwards of 30 to 40%, depending on where you live in the nation, of your paycheck being taken out of your paycheck before you even get to see your own paycheck and being given to a government institution, whether that be the state government, the federal government, whether that be entitlement programs or a combination of all three of those things. You are looking at a massive amount of your paycheck being taken away from you, again, before you can even access it. And my biggest issue, and I've said this on the show many times, is that why are we as free people, why are we as people who have, again, freedom of speech, of assembly, but also the free will to be able to do what we want as long as it is not harming other people? You know, the live and let live theory that I've talked about a few times over the past couple of months. Why are we not allowed to have our own money and make our own decisions, right? Getting your paycheck, being able to, if we're going to have a tax collection service, the International Revenue Service, if you will, if we are going to have that institution, why can't we pay them at the end of the year when it's due? Why do we need to have every single paycheck money taken out of it? And, you know, it gets to a point where you combine these two ideas of technology and taxation. I believe that we are at a point of chainless slavery. We've gotten to a point where people are living every single day, or I should say, working every single day just to live rather than going out, having work as a passion, having work as, you know, something to give us deeper meaning in life, but, you know, not necessarily having to do that every single waking second of the day. It does feel like we're getting closer and closer to that. You know, the more time that we spend, the more time we're going to spend working, the more time that we are away from things that matter, whether you want to talk about building families, whether you want to talk about actually having something to live for, like, you know, friends and camaraderie and participating in events outside of what work actually is. And we get to, of course, like the biggest issue in my opinion when it comes to taxation, and that is the fact that we didn't even have a income tax until 1913. There was a program that was set by Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, of course, and that was a program of taxation in order to fund the Union. And the whole point of that function was that as soon as the war was over, they were going to roll back that taxation. And most people nowadays would say, well, you know, that thing's never going to have a sunset and that's going to be a tax forever. And actually it did. It got rolled back. It did not exist for, you know, upwards of 50 years. And then you come back to 1913, right as World War I is just about to start, which is interesting timing to say the least. And all of a sudden we are taxing every single person on money that they make, which was not a way that our country was set up to be. Now, you can make a very fair point that our collection of taxes was not up to standard. We were not collecting enough, and therefore our country was not growing enough. But maybe that was the point, and instead, where we look at it now is not only is there a federal income tax, but I believe all but 4 or 5 states, and I could be wrong on that, so don't hate on me. All but 4 or 5 states have a state income tax as well. You are getting double tax on money before you even get to touch it. And now comes my biggest gripe with living in the society that we call the United States of America today. And that is just the unaffordability that we've reached. And you can look back on all of the different things that I've talked about in this show so far. You can look back on our spending on foreign entanglements. You can look back on taxation. You can look back on the technology. You can look back on unelected bureaucrats. You can blame all of these things. And at the end of the day, what it culminates in is the unaffordability, or in other words, the inflation, the cost of living, in a way, crisis that we are living through today. You know, I don't want to be that type of person that's going to say it's way worse for me than it is for any other generation, because I'm sure, especially the way that things are going now, the younger generation is going to have it way worse than I had it, and it's going to keep going down that line because things are really, generally speaking, not getting any better. That being said, you look back on numbers that show you, the cost of housing, the cost of food, the cost of energy, almost any metric that you're looking at, and you look at, pre 2000 numbers, from the 20th century, and the affordability has gotten to a point where it's no longer affordable. Now, what has happened particularly in someone like myself's lifetime is, I guess, the best way to put it would be a massively unfortunate sequence of events, if you want to put it mildly. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, went through the as a child and my parents going through the Great Recession, of course, under Bush and Obama. Finally starting to come back from that. Things are looking better. You get out of the Obama years, you go into Trump's first term. Economically speaking, we're looking much better. At least our economy is recovering. And then we get hit with COVID towards the end of that. What did COVID do? Well, number one, the isolation that it did to all young people and all people in general, but all young people at a very crucial stage in development of not only the brain, but the development of people as people, the development of skills. And instead, you cooped them up in a room, made them take classes on a computer every single day, and removed their ability to join together for activities, whether you want to talk about sports, whether you want to talk about clubs, whether you want to talk about academics, any of these things. And you removed that from those people and, younger versions of myself, of course. And COVID not only had ramifications on the social level and the ability of younger people to, again, get that experience of being a young person, but it economically destroyed everything that was building. You look at inflation numbers over the past 6 years, and I had to do a little bit of calculation just to find this, but essentially one of the most ridiculous facets of having a federal bank that we have here, the Fed in the United States, is that we are automatically going to have some sort of inflation. There is a target inflation rate. Now, you might be thinking, and I would say rightly so, that wouldn't the goal to be having no inflation? Well, the Fed would say, no, that's not correct. A good sign of having inflation is that your economy is growing. Well, what happens when you have years like 2020 to 2026? Well, we don't talk about that, is essentially. So that's what we're here for. We're going to just bring that in. So what has happened since COVID? Well, depending on the industry, you could be looking at anywhere between the industry or category, I should say, you could be looking at anything between a 30 to a 60% increase in price since COVID. Okay. I say that. And what does that mean to you? Well, if 30 to 60% sounds high to you, I just want to quote or share my quote. I want to share my calculation of what the expected or target inflation rate, what that number would be over that 6-year period. And if you are a smart enough person with math and you remember that calculation of year over year compounded growth with interest, you will probably be able to figure this out quite quickly. But over 6 years, the expected rate of inflation, if you were to hit that target number, which is 2%, would be about $112.62. So 12%, 12.62%. I don't know why I said $112. I based my math off $100 deposit essentially. But what you're looking at is a 12.62% if we were to hit our target inflation rate over that time. And instead, like I mentioned, we have roughly between 30 and 60 increases in cost. Now, what does that break down to? So if you're looking at housing costs, those numbers have gone up roughly 50% since a home that you wanted to buy in early 2020 or late 2019, maybe a home that costs $100,000 is now going to cost you something in the realm of $150,000. And you're laughing at me because, especially if you're from the New York, New Jersey area, there's no such thing as a home that's worth $100,000, not even in 2020. So maybe a more realistic number to you would be $250,000. Well, that home is now worth about $400,000. That just is what it is. And you may say, okay, that sounds really high. What about something like energy costs? Well, energy costs have gone up even more than that, somewhere in the range of 50 to 70%. Now, I will caveat that with the fact that we are looking at a time now where because of this lovely war that we've gotten ourselves into. The cost of fuel and oil products is up exponentially. And okay, understood. Maybe that number is more like between 30 and 50%. Fair enough. It's still up tremendously. The cost of food is up around 30 over the 2020 to 2026 timeframe. This one is the best to me, the best indicator, I should say. It's not the best. This is actually terrible. For all of us that we have grown up in America and we would love to have that American dream, right? Get that nice, shiny new home, go buy your land, make your life and retire on that land. What you need for that is new housing construction. One of the biggest problems with that, aside from the fact that the costs have gone up a lot, and I will explain that in a second, although the fact that costs have gone up, the supply is going down. Unless you want to live in this nice fancy apartment building like I'm living in here, new supply is not around. More than likely not around by you, unless you are following me from the middle of the country where there's a lot of development. Maybe you have a better chance. Up here in New Jersey, where I am, the only new buildings that are going in are basically shit box apartment buildings and condos. And it's getting tiring. So if you wanted to build a new home and do it by yourself and go hire a contractor, yada, 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 go through the whole thing. What you're looking at is over 50%, something between 50 and 60% increases in construction materials to build a home. And you would say to yourself, well, okay, it sounds like my home, just for building it, even if I wanted to purchase land and go build it, has also gone up over 50%. You'd be almost correct, except for one other crucial fact. And that's the fact that labor wages have also gone up. And of course they have, as they should, with prices rising. So this is a double-edged coin. One of the last points I'm going to make in the show here today, but labor has gone up roughly 20 to 25% in the last 6 years. Well, I guess that sounds good in a way and bad in a way, right? It sounds good. The workers are getting paid more. Sounds bad because now we all need to pay for that, right? I think it's actually worse than that. After all the numbers that I just read off, whether you want to talk about the cost of food, the cost of housing, the cost of energy, the cost of any real commodity, and they've gone up somewhere in the realm of 30 to 70%, depending on the item. And then you look at wage growth, that's only gone up 20 to 25. The never-ending chase to have the minimum wage that you see around, it's in news cycles pretty much every single election cycle, midterm or on-year election for the presidency. Minimum wage is almost always a part of that argument. And the never-ending chase is bringing that minimum wage up in order to match so that people can afford life. Well, the unfortunate fact is that minimum wage essentially drives the baseline of rising labor costs. And if we get to a point where the rising labor cost is no longer actually allowing people to buy anything, the average person, well, then what comes in? We're already seeing it. You get the robots, you get the kiosks, you go to a McDonald's and all you get is a computer that has a freaking shit stain swiped across the front of it and nobody there to clean it. And that's what we're looking at. The overall increase in pricing is roughly 30 to 35% across the board. I don't know if I believe that after the numbers that I brought up. Again, you have housing somewhere in the range of 50% increasing. The energy sector somewhere between 50 and 70. Take out that gas, maybe it's more like 30 to 50. Food's up 30%. Building materials up between 40 and 60, 65%. And the cost of labor up. And you look back, and again, I want to tie it all back to the fact that this is all about America 250. This is about us celebrating our birth as a nation. And are we upholding those values? And my argument is we've strayed quite far from them. Whether you want to talk about the technocracy that we have started and continue to uphold here in the States, whether you want to talk about the absurd taxation that we're all going through, whether you want to talk about the fact that we have a massive amount of unelected bureaucrats that are in many ways running the country, whether you want to talk about other things that I didn't mention today, like the Supreme Court justices who are supposed to set the law of the land and be a counterbalance actually just falling into line with political agendas. There are so many issues that we have, all beside the fact that it costs so much fucking money to live in this country, and specifically in, where I live right now, but in a lot of different places because of mass exodus from cities looking for different places to live. You can look at a place like New Jersey, a place like Nashville, places all around Florida. You can look at places in Arizona. You can look at places in Colorado. Basically, all beautiful places to live, great places to live, hubs of commerce, and it all costs an ass load to live here. And the whole point of me bringing all of this up is the fact that I think that we can actually get to a very good place as a country, as a society, as a community. If we went back to those principles that were given to us, handed down to us in the documents, such as the Declaration of Independence, such as the Constitution of the United States, such as the Federalist Papers, and we can really learn a lot about maybe where our direction needs to go instead of continuing to throw money at problems when the money is not the issue, continuing to have people elected that don't align with our values, and continuing to have those people that we're electing actually put in other people that are unelected and are actually making our lives worse. And at the end of the day, if we follow pretty much by the letter of the law, we would be able to remove pretty much everybody. We would be able to remove President Trump via corruption, be able to remove most of his administration through that corruption. We would be able to remove, I'm sure, a high plurality, probably a major majority of Congress, both higher and lower houses there, based on their corruption, insider trading, and what have you. And we would be able to actually get to a better place. But it's up to us. It's up to us, the people, to actually uphold those standards and make this government of, by, and for the people actually uphold those standards. Before I get off here, I want to bring up a statistic that I saw while I was doing a little research this morning. And the overall satisfaction with the government is absurd. You have the approval ratings, and that is what it is. Trump, I think, is still somewhere around 30%, which is absurd to think about, given what's been going on over the past year or so. But in Congress specifically, I believe that the Senate's approval rating or satisfaction rate is somewhere around 15%. And the actual House of Congress, the House, Congressional House, is at 10%. If that's the case, people, why the fuck do we keep voting the same fucking people in? Why are people having essentially lifelong stays in Congress? It does not make sense to me. We can fix this. I truly believe we can fix this. Let's just get these fucking people who do not care what our lives are becoming, and let's get them the hell out of there and get some new blood in there. I think that we have an ability to change things. We have an ability to eliminate the waste and corruption. We just have to band together and do it. That's all I got for you. I hope you guys have a very blessed week and a fantastic 4th of July celebrating 250. And let's make this 250 a turning point. I think we could do it. We have the midterms coming up in a few months here. Make educated decisions. Try to push in write-in candidates if both the candidates you're being forced down your throat suck. Find people that actually want to do the job correctly, and maybe go find people that don't actually want the job but will be damn good at it, because I can guarantee you that that might actually end up with an answer that we can all get behind and support. That's all I got for you guys. Have a great week. This is the We the Patriots podcast. Sal Assante signing off. Peace out.
I want to be something, not nothing. Trapped inside my dream and I'm running away from these demons. But the feeling's so good, I'ma keep dreaming.